Hi everyone, let's get into the examples. And we're going to start off with some of the basics. So let's just write an equation. Okay, so we want to write an equation for a line. And when we write an equation for a line that has slope and a y-intercept, we like this form. Remember, slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Remember that m is your slope and b is the y-intercept. So what might help me is if I label the information that I have slope is 1/2 and I have y-intercept is -4. So if slope is m, that means that m is 1/2, and that means that the y-intercept is -4. So when I substitute this into y equals mx plus b form, I'm going to substitute that in there. Now, plus a negative is going to be weird, so I'm going to write this a little bit different for you. This equation is y equals m is 1/2. X stays there, plus a -4, we don't really write, so you just leave the -4, and this is the final answer. This is an equation that has a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of -4. You're going to need that for a few of the problems that we're going to do. So you're going to have some practice problems that are going to ask you to determine if the equations are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. If lines are parallel, so parallel lines have same slope. This is the symbol for perpendicular. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal, which is what we saw earlier. And neither means that the slope is not the same or it's not opposite reciprocal. Okay, so let's take a look. We have two equations. In the equation y equals 3/2 x minus 6, what would the slope be? What would the slope be in this equation? Remember that the slope is in y equals mx, it's got to be in y equals mx plus b form, and slope is m. And in this case, it looks like m is 3/2, so the slope is 3/2. In the second equation, so in this equation right here, I have 2x plus 3y equals -9. Now, this is not in y equals mx plus b form. So I need to get this into y equals mx plus b form, and this is something that we spent time doing last class, right? And so I want us to review some steps. We want to get y by itself. So that means we're going to move the x term first. So I'm left with 3y equals -2x minus 9, right? Because the 9 was negative to begin with. From there, since you want to get y by itself, we're going to get rid of the 3 that's attached to it by division. And so we're going to divide each term by 3. So I get y is equal to -2/3 x. You're going to leave the fraction as it is. And then -9, right, divided by 3 is -3. So now we have the equation in y equals mx plus b form. In this second equation, what is the slope? Slope is whatever is attached to x, so the slope happens to be this right here. So in the second equation, the slope is -2/3. Compare -2/3 with positive 3/2. They have something in common. They are flip-flops of each other. Do you see it? And they are opposite signs. So we have opposite and reciprocal. So these lines are perpendicular. Sorry for the horrible handwriting. So these lines are perpendicular to each other because they are opposite and reciprocal slopes. Let's take a look at this one. So in the first equation, I can see that what's attached to x is -3/2. So that is my slope. In this second equation right here, which I have 3x minus 2y is equal to 2, it's just like in the previous example, right? I don't have I don't have it in y equals mx plus b form. So So I want to get it in y equals mx plus b form, and you always get rid of the x term. So we always get rid of the x term. And that this negative right here stays behind. The next thing that I want to do is, because I need to get y by itself, I want to divide by a -2 so I can cancel out whatever's attached to y, and I'm going to divide every term by -2. So now check this out. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, so it's going to turn into positive 3/2. And then a positive divided by a negative is a negative. Oops, I forgot my x. So the slope here is positive 3/2. And remember that in our original equation, the first equation, our slope was negative 3/2. Okay? They're not opposite reciprocals because reciprocals are flipped. They're opposite, right? But they're not reciprocal. They're also not the same as each other because this one is negative and this one is positive. So they're not the same. So that means that they're not parallel. They're not perpendicular. So these lines are neither parallel nor perpendicular for that reason. Okay. This will be the last example for this part before part 3. So we're going to determine from a graph if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So we're going to count rise over run. Okay, pretend you don't see the equations there. So I'm going to start with this line here. I'm going to call it line 1, and this one's going to be line 2. So let's start with line 1. The slope looks like, if I count, it goes up 1 over 1. Do you see it? Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So it looks like the slope is rise 1 over 1, which is 1. So line 1 has a slope of 1. Let's take a look at line 2. Line 2 goes down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. Do you see it? Down 1 over 2. So this slope right here, since it's down 1, the rise is -1 over 2. So line 2 has a slope of -1/2. What do you all think this is? Parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Well, they're opposites, right? They're opposites from each other, but they're not even reciprocals to each other. So it's not perpendicular, it's not parallel because they're crossing each other. So this one is another example of neither. Okay, so let this soak in, and then you're going to have video 3 to watch before you get to try this on your own.